I've got a few more minutes, it turns out, and then back again, top of the hour.
So why don't you start then, James? Seeing as you're going to have to go in a few minutes, why don't you start? Like, what do you understand by the word totalitarianism, and who is they?
Yeah. So what I understand by totalitarianism is it feels like it was pretty well summed up in what was discussed earlier. It's where there's either one individual or one group that basically is in charge. They've got it figured out, and they're ruling with violence, typically. Though in the United States, we seem to have perfected another system which is totalitarian, but it's government by the rich for the rich, but seemingly not through violence, though at its core there is violence. In terms of a definition, I mean, that's just it. I would just say power that is concentrated and that is trending towards the absolute, but including softer forms of power, such as, mind control, thought control, manipulation of media, bounding of debate, bounding of discussion, et cetera, et cetera. All the stuff Noam Chomsky wrote about, those fall into it as well. So that's my beginnings of a fuzzy definition. Happy to participate more. I've got easily 15 minutes, so I'll be here for a few. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's one obvious they that jumps to mind, which is this notion of the tech elites, right? Which is like, I have some experience of that. Like I've hung around in these like kind of startup spaces before, like not too much. I spent about 6 months in Germany, in Berlin, like where they have like a lot of startups there, and I was doing like some NGOs, like there was a startup incubator for some NGO things, so I ended up at the main space over there where they have like SoundCloud and stuff like that. And it's like this sort of very sort of, I don't know if yuppie is the right word, like sort of, I don't know, this sort of like new yuppie-ish kind of vibe over there. And I don't know, it's like, it's very, well, I don't know. I don't know if you want to get too much into the psyche of the tech elites that's, across the world or whatever. You've got all this Clubhouse stuff happening as well. I know there's been some, I don't know. I don't know. It's a thing. But yeah, that wouldn't have come into it like, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it would have been more like, or even like 10, even if thinking back to Occupy, it was, we are the 99%, they is the 1%, they was the 1%, but now they is more like, I don't know, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, maybe. But leave it at that for now.
Yeah, the they for me is a vaguer thing than that. Like I wouldn't be able to put any names to the they, and the individuals in these positions I see as being, they're just actors playing roles kind of thing, right? If it wasn't them, it would be someone else. The system demands that certain people play these roles, and they just happen to be the ones that fell into them. So yeah, that they is an invisible, body of people who have the ability to exert influence in the world without anyone really knowing where it's coming from. That's the they that I have. I don't know who they are. I don't. They're not individuals. It's this mysterious grey cloud of whatever. But yeah, totalitarianism is it's a really difficult one to pin down, because monarchies are forms of totalitarianism, dictatorships are forms of totalitarianism, but the kind of totalitarianism that we are heading towards, or that I fear we are heading towards, should I say, is more like a 1984 type thing, right? Where someone said this in the thing, right? That I can't remember which way around they said it, but authoritarianism is you do what I say because I'm in control of you, right? Whereas totalitarianism is you do what you're told because it's in everybody's best interest, right? You've been sold a lie, right? In order to modify your behavior, you've been sold a lie, and it's a lie, but you buy into it anyway, right? For me, at the very, very heart of totalitarianism is this cognitive dissonance where the people have given up on the ideal of truthfulness and, and have bought into some kind of nonsense, the Aryan thing. I don't believe for 1 second that most Germans actually believe that the Aryans were the master race, right? This was a lie that was sold to them bit by bit over time, right? It didn't all come at once. It came bit by bit over time until everyone is going around telling themselves in public the same, because they're fearful if they don't buy into the lie, if they are seen not buying into the lie, then punishment ensues. So it's buying into a lie at the threat of violence or incarceration or something like that if you don't buy into the lie. That for me is the essence of totalitarianism.
Yeah, I think the bit by bit is super important. Like, there's lots of people will, you know, talk about slippery slopes, and if somebody makes a slippery slope argument, then someone, you know, sort of say like, oh well, you know, you're making a slippery slope argument, are you? But it's like, I don't know, like, how do you know when a slippery slope is a slippery slope, or when it's just a point of argument? I do, you know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? That the slippery slope argument is used to dismiss an argument. Oh, that's just a slippery slope. Well, yeah, it is, but that's how it fucking happens, right? Is a slippery slope the thin end of the wedge? That's why we have these idioms in the language, right? Because they are real fucking things.
Yeah, and on the we they thing, I don't know how anti or pro Petersonian this crowd is, but I think he would say that he would always defer to we, like probably just say they is we, you know, like there is no they, like it's actually, you know, it's our responsibility or whatever. But yeah, I don't know.
Are you able to speak, Jonathan? Do you have anything you want to throw in? If you're able to speak now that we can see you. Oh no, he's disappeared again. He's hiding. He's gone back behind the couch. Oh no, there he is.
Actually, to clarify, there's two Jonathans in the room.
Oh, these are different Jonathans. Oh, I see. Sorry, I didn't realize.
The original Jonathan is the Antifa one, and he's just listening in. And Jonathan too, welcome. And
okay, so John, I didn't realize. I thought you were the same Jonathan coming in on another device. I do apologize. So what we're doing is we're discussing what we understand by the term totalitarian, what does it actually mean to us, what nuance of meaning do we bring to the word, and who, if anyone, is they. Yeah, when we talk about they, who is they? So feel free to add anything you've got.
I've been trying to figure out why authoritarian governance has become attractive in so many places in the world in the last several years. Philippines, Brazil, Mexico, the United States. And that, to me, it almost looks like this issue of a loss of identity, that what the authoritarians are providing is an identity that a large portion of the world's population has lost because of the rapid modernization, not just globalization, but modernization. And I've observed that at the same time, there's an international cosmopolitan class, like the young man that was just speaking. You find young people like him in every capital and in every university city around the world. But then there's this large population that doesn't identify with the agricultural history of their people, with the religious institutions, with the federal governments, whether it's Moscow or Washington, who are frustrated and don't see modernity as satisfying their need for identity. I think authoritarian is a better term, because every culture in some way is totalitarian. We all live in a cultural fishbowl that explains the universe to us. But the ones that are authoritarian, in other words, in which a very few people dictate the rules and life of everybody, that people are all of a sudden attracted to authoritarian leaders. And I'm curious why you think this phenomena has happened. Now, in the United States, let me say, it largely happened intentionally. You go back to Justice Powell's memo in 1970 that he wrote for the Chamber of Commerce, in which he articulated that my generation had rejected liberal capitalism, and that was rejecting the American dream. And he called upon wealthy people to gather together to stop this, and they did. So we have the American Enterprise Institute. A bunch of foundations emerged, and out of that, a political strategy emerged. But I don't know how it happened in Brazil or Mexico or South Africa or Philippines or even India and China. The psychology of wanting to have an authoritarian leader. That's what I can't grasp.
James was talking about this before. He was, you know, like in times of confusion and chaos, that the certainty of authoritarianism can be very, very appealing, right? Can be very attractive. It also, in a world which is profoundly confusing, difficult to make sense of, difficult to think that you can make informed decisions in, again, it's like, okay, here's someone telling me what to do. I don't have to think too much for myself, right? And again, I can absolutely see the appeal of that. So I think an interesting question, which you were sort of, I think, alluding to, right, is to what extent are those conditions of uncertainty and confusion deliberately created in order to create the desire for authoritarianism in our governance structures, right? And I think that's a super interesting question.
Because the chaos, I mean, the chaos is largely constructed.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
We don't have, you know, if you look at the statistics, there's been improvement in calories and diets, in relative stability in the post-Cold War world. And yet there's been a breakdown of psychological security. And so,
well, there's the war on communism, the war on drugs, the war on terror, now the war on COVID, right? I mean, we've never, ever not been in a state of war, right? I mean, you know, that we talk about peacetime since 1945, but that is not true. We've been at economic and cultural warfare with other nations, and we have been at what should we call it? Economic stratification warfare within our own cultures. And yeah, so and like I say, one war after another has been contrived, something in the world for us to be frightened of, all the time, right? All the time. That has never, ever left us.
Right. So I call it, in America, in dealing with nuclear weapons policies, I call it the Ching-Ling Lam Abdul Gomez Borofsky syndrome. That at any moment it could be Ching-Ling Long, North Korea, China,
it's a catchy
anywhere.
Title.
Anybody named Abdul, anybody named Gomez, anybody named Borofsky, and at any moment, the American white middle class and lower middle class can be persuaded that an ethnic other is threatening them, and it changes from season to season. But this is not new. It just took hold. It took hold. Why would it have taken hold in a period in which there hasn't been mass starvation? There has been improvements in so many of the metrics of the quality of people's lives. Great disparities of wealth.
Very dubious, those stats.
Not like let's back up. Not like the 1920s, where you actually had starvation in the United States in the 1930s. You actually had starvation. You had the Dust Bowl. You had actually agricultural base in areas collapsing.
The only reason that's not still going on is oil, right? I mean, it's petrochemical agriculture is the one and only reason. They killed the soil, right? Through bad agricultural practices over decades. They destroyed the soil so that it was no longer able to grow crops, and they managed to kick the can down the road with petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides and fungicides and so on, right? But I mean, it speaks. I mean, this is not really what we're on, right? But it speaks to a deep malaise in our culture that we don't get to the root of the problem.
I'm asking about the psychological phenomena of questing for the authoritarian leadership that we see in so many places. Given the fact that we don't have the chaos of, you know, that we had World War I, World War II, and the period in between, in which
I think you were onto it when you first started, to be honest, when you were talking about modernization. I don't think it's people seeking authoritarian leaders. I think it's people seeking a more harkening back to. I think that's what I'd see like Trump and Bolsonaro and those types of leaders as. But like I don't really like what's I don't know, like I guess there's different dispositions to come into the totalitarianism discussion with, but it's a very different, like, I mean, when did Trump leave office? Was that like, was it like 2021 August now? It was this, it was the end of last year, right? The end of 2020. Like, I don't know, like I thought, like my impression was that the totalitarianism that we're worried about now is more like the, you know, the China kind of big pharma kind of end of the totalitarianism spectrum. But there's also this, there's this other side to it clearly, where it's like these authoritarian leaders, like was it like Modi in India and so on. But those are two very different, those two things are very different characters. So I'm not sure how to factor that.
Those overtly authoritarian leaders are easy to spot, right? And this is the thing. I mean, what concerns me much more gravely is that the authoritarian agenda continues unabated under Biden, right? An apparently affable, incompetent, doddery old man, right? Who, you know, wouldn't be able to put together an authoritarian regime if he wanted to, right? Simply doesn't have the capability to do so. However, it continues on with him so supposedly at the helm. And, you know, the difficulty with combating it is identifying it, right? If you've got a Hitler or a Trump or a Pol Pot or whatever, and you got, you know, black jackboots and all of this kind of thing, you know, you've got an aesthetic which is easily identifiable and pointable to and reactable against, right? You can start formulating a plan against it. But when it's this nebulous thing that's just there creeping in at you kind of from all directions, and you don't know exactly how or why or who's responsible, right? But you just got this undeniable sense that it's pushing in and pushing in and pushing in on you. That's what's frightening to me.
So you think, I mean, you, on one hand, you said that Biden is incompetent to be an authoritarian leader, but that it's happening anyway.
Correct.
So it's not right. So I don't accept your first premise that Biden is incompetent and mentally challenged, and I certainly don't accept the premise that the Democratic Party is authoritarian. If anything,
No, I've been saying it's got nothing to do with the established political instruments. That's what I'm saying.
So okay, that's
it's beyond that.
I was unpacking that. So it seemed to me you were arguing that part of the characteristic of the modern state, whether it is a communist capitalist state as China, or whether it's a neoliberal state like the United States, or whether it's whether it's like chaos in Brazil, part of the characteristic of the modern state is it an inevitable movement toward totalitarianism? Is that what you're saying? Is that inevitable?
Well, I think there is an inevitable tendency towards it, right? I don't think we inevitably end up there, but I mean, Jordan Peterson has spoken about this, right? That governments tend towards authoritarianism, right? That the structure of government means that they are constantly, unless they are checked, they will tend towards authoritarianism, right? And so, but the question is, are we any longer capable of checking them? I mean, Daniel Schmachtenberger does a really good thing on this, right? Which is that there's essentially three elements, or you can break society down into three elements: the market, government, and the people, right? The population. And that these three things are required to check each other. So the market, if left unfettered, will start selling children into slavery, right? Because it's profitable to do so. So you can't just leave the market alone. It needs to be reined in of its worst tendencies by government. And government has a monopoly on force so that it is able to do that. However far reaching the corporation becomes, the government can, if necessary, with force, you know, stop it doing awful things. And then it is the people's job to rein in the government. And this is where the thing is broken now, right? Because we are no longer educated, powerful, educated, empowered, or sovereign enough to actually be an effective check on government. The market has taken over government, and so now we have this market government duopoly with a monopoly on force and a monopoly on the media and a monopoly on every goddamn resource on this planet against us, the people, right? And this is where we stand right now. It's very, 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 very dangerous.
I think the only thing you left out there was technology. Like that's a great sort of trifecta of thing: the market, government, and people. Yeah. But the technology runs through all of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and before it would have been
amplifies
like,
everything, right? It just amplifies everything. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've had the innovation of the internet, and it was like sort of very free market in the beginning, and the people could participate to that to one or another degree. But the government were a bit slow on the uptake, but now we're seeing the government starting to get in there. So I think that's a lot to do with what's happening.
And they don't really know what they're doing because they don't really understand the technology, right? There are not enough expert people in positions of real decision making on behalf of the public, right? Who are acting on behalf of the public and who understand the issues and the technology sufficiently to make good choices on behalf of the public. I mean, these people just simply don't exist.
Yeah. Apparently they're doing a good job in China, but I don't like to talk or act like I know about a place if I haven't actually been there, and I just haven't been, like, so I don't know. But you know, you've got to, I don't know what to think of it.
So just everyone's going to be back in a minute. Jonathan, well, who's they? I mean, you maybe don't use it in your speech, but I mean, commonly people talk about they as this thing out there. Do you have any notion of they? Do you ever use the term?
Yes, I use the term when I know whom I'm
A specific group that you're
identifying.
talking about, right? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
otherwise I wouldn't use the term, because that it's just you know, it is. That's why I use the analogy of the subconscious projections of fear onto different ethnic identities that's used by the military industrial
Okay.
complex
Yeah.
of the United States to generate an $800 billion theft from the people in a paradigm of pursuing security based on a Roman adage that no longer applies. The adage being, prepare for peace, receive war, prepare for war, receive peace. And so they have to generate fear and institutionalize adversity.